Hey, brother, hear me now. Brother dog, know me, understand.
Welcome to the Sargassum Podcast. I'm Robbie Thigpen.
I'm Francisca Elmer.
And I am Mar Fernandez. And we are your hosts for today. And we are going to share with you the latest ideas and concepts about sargassum and sargassum beaching events which have become an international challenge.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sargassum Podcast. We hope we have another fun-filled day of action and adventure for you, or at least maybe a good story or two.
Hi, Robbie. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Mar, how are you?
Good. We had finally a nice weekend here in Germany, nice weather. And we've been testing the drone to also learn how to look at algae from the sky. So very exciting stuff. What about you, Fran? How is it going?
Well, we had a really rainy weekend here in Mexico. And yesterday, once the rain stopped, I went back to the beach to check on the sargassum situation. It's always a surprise when you get to the beach of how much there is. And while the last week or two, I was able to go swimming because the brown water and the smelly sargassum was gone and we just had a little bit on the beach. It has gone back to being quite a bit on the beach and brown water again. So, and the smell is back too. It's not that bad, but yeah, we're back to a lot of sargassum. Robbie, did you have anything interesting happening?
Well, not really. We had the hurricane move through here, good bit east of where we are, and they had a lot of stuff. But with that, and with the beginning of September, the weather has changed. So this is a good time of year for being in South Carolina, and all not too hot, not too cool, actually kind of pleasant, and so that's kind of a good thing right there. But the devastation brought by the hurricane is horrible, and so yeah. But anyway, let's get on to our podcast today. This is being brought to you by our good friends at Seafields. They're doing a lot of good stuff to help eradicate some of these issues associated with these beaching inundations and all. And with that, we'll ask Francisca if she'll introduce our guest for this week.
Yes, of course I will. Our two guests today are Dr. Denise Herzing and Casey Ruche. Dr. Denise Herzing is the founder and research director of the Wild Dolphin Project and has studied Atlantic spotted dolphins in the Bahamian waters for 32 years. In addition to many scientific articles that she wrote, she is also the co-editor of Dolphin Communications and Cognition and the author of Dolphin Diaries, My 25 Years with Spotted Dolphins in the Bahamas, and the Wild Dolphin Project, which came out in 2002. Casey Ruche spends her summer living on a boat in the Bahamas studying wild dolphins. But 10 years ago, she thought she would be working as a pharmacist. She started university as a pre-pharmacy student, but after just a few months and also working in a pharmacy, she realized it was not for her. So she discovered her real passion for understanding animal behavior and switched to ecology, evolution, and organismal biology concentration, and has been working with the Wild Dolphin Project since her graduation. The Wild Dolphin Project is the world's longest-running underwater study of dolphins in the world. Since 1985, the team has spent months out at sea every summer, living on boats and studying two species of dolphins that live in the shallow sandbanks of the Bahamas, the Atlantic spotted dolphins and the Atlantic bottlenose dolphins. The researchers have made many discoveries over the years regarding aspects of social structure, paternity, habitat use, behavior, communication, and movement patterns. Welcome to the podcast, Denise and Casey.
Great to be here.
Excellent, and it's great to have you. We always start our interviews off with this first question, and they rarely let me have an opportunity to ask it and all. And this is like such a fun question because this is a personal question that we're asking you. and so what we'd want to know is, what does sargassum mean to you?
Well, sargassum to me means a toy that the dolphins play with. In my work zone, in my personal zone, of course, I live on the beach in Florida, so we see sargassum problems here as well. Not as bad as in the Caribbean, but you know, it's part of the ecosystem in its many forms, and things have changed, right? So that's what it means to me. Cassie, your turn.
To me, it basically means the same thing. So it's just a type of free-floating seaweed out in the ocean. And yeah, the main reason I see it a lot is because the dolphins are always playing with it. So it's a nice toy, natural toy for them out in the wild.
Very cool. So
Nice.
how do actually dolphins use sargassum as a toy? I mean, do they literally just play with it, or do you think it also has other functions for them?
I mean, as far as we know, they just play with it. I mean, they don't really eat plants that we are aware of. So imagine a dolphin in the water with the appendages that they have and anything they can drag, including plastic, unfortunately. But sargassum is their natural toy, and they taunt and tease each other with it. And Cassie, you could attest to taunting and teasing humans with it as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so I mean, like Denise was saying, is they'll drag it on their peck or fluke, which is the fluke is the tail, and when they'll kind of like pass it back and forth between each other, but then sometimes they'll even drop it to us, and we can swim down and grab it, and then we can toss it back to them, and they'll come in, swoop in, and pick it up, and then drag it around. But yeah, I mean, they'll have it on their tail, and they'll kind of just like hang it and kind of wiggle it on their tail, kind of tempting us to come and grab it, but it's not proper dolphin etiquette to take it off of their tail, so we have to wait until they drop it. But yeah, it's kind of like a game of keep away.
Right.
Well, wait a minute. Okay. I try to play fetch with my dog, and he always grabs the ball and takes control of it. And it's more like him playing fetch with me, and rather than the other way around. Is that what you're describing here? You're playing fetch at some level of with the dolphins, and they're in control?
Denise, do you want to take it, or you want me to?
Well, I mean, I think it's just what Cassie said. Yeah, they're totally in control. When we drop it in the water, if we're playing this game, you can dive down and try to grab it again, and right before you get it, they swoop in and get it because they're so good at it, right? And they do that with each other too. I mean, they taunt and tease each other. It's it's part of their practice, I guess, to play with each other. And occasionally, when we're not just observing them, they include us in the interaction. So it's pretty funny. Yeah.
So from what I understand about your research, you've been following around these same pods, so they're familiar with you. So are they initiating play with you guys? Is that what you're saying to me?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we try to be fairly benign and non-invasive and just observe their behavior. That's our number one plan of action in the water. But because we're in the water, you can't really hide from a dolphin, right? So if they're interactive and we're not disturbing their normal behavior of the larger group, we'll interact with them with sargassum and play with them to, keep up the bond and the trust level so we can watch them, basically.
Wow.
Wow. That is super cool. So the dolphins don't eat the sargassum and they don't really use it as a habitat, but do you think they are dependent on it? Like, would their lives be worse if they didn't have the sargassum to play with?
What do you think, Cassie?
I mean, play is a very integral part of their social behavior. So during play, you can learn different things. So you can learn when the dolphin... Sorry, hold on. The dolphins learn socially how to interact with one another. So during play, you can kind of understand if you're crossing a boundary with one dolphin, or maybe if that dolphin is trying to say that, they're annoyed and they don't want to play anymore. So they can learn those different interactions, and that's always important when you're growing up within a society that's very social. So they get a lot of information from play. So, I mean, the sargassum is definitely one of the main toys we see them play with. So I think if they lost that, they would need to find something else to replace it with.
And in addition to the sargassum, the species that they play with, there's also benthic sargassum in this area. And I'm not sure, Cassie, if you've ever seen this, but the bottlenose dolphins sometimes hang out in these fields of benthic sargassum on the bottom, right? And they'll go down and they'll actually rub and scratch against it. So maybe they'd lose their scratching post, as we say. So I guess they do have multiple aspects that they use sargassum in.
Maybe I add a follow-up question on this. Do you think they also use the sargassum maybe to clean themselves in a way, or do you think this is not really what they're doing? This is really just playing and it has no other function for them?
They slough their skin constantly. I don't know that sargassum would be very functional as far as scraping their skin, but you never know. When they're sick, maybe it has an additional aspect of that.
So there's no sargassum loofahs then?
Well, there are, like I just said, on the bottom. The bottlenose go down and big sargassum clumps that are benthic on the bottom, and they do rub but again, I don't know that they're really trying to get stuff off their skin. I just think it feels good, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes if there's a big clump at the surface of the free-floating sargassum, sometimes the dolphins will kind of swim through it and kind of like roll around, and then as it falls off. So maybe that provides some kind of scratching technique or something from the surface. But yeah, like Denise says, we don't know exactly what they're using it for, but like she said, it just probably feels good or scratches an itch. We're not sure.
Yeah. For us humans, the sargassum often has hydroids on it that actually makes us itchy because of if we touch it, then we get bumps and itchiness. Are dolphins also like prone to be affected by hydroids, or do you think they're not bothered by them?
We definitely see hydroids sometimes on the sargassum, and of course we humans are bothered by that. Dolphins swim through jellyfish all the time and these sargassum, so they must have some immunity like some of the fish do, for hanging out with jellyfish and sargassum. So lucky them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Excellent. One of the things that I find disgusting in the world is marine megafauna and stuff being kept in aquariums, whale sharks, a lot of these other large, huge fish, as well as, marine mammals. But this has led to a lot of research for these different species in captivity. But you guys don't do that, and I like that a lot. And why is it important to study dolphins in the wild?
Well, first of all, it's where they live, right? And it's where they act natural. So that was at least my vision of trying to find a place where you could study underwater, where you see what they're doing and can correlate sound and behavior. You can't study everything in the wild, though. There has been great research that's come out of captive situations. Our ethics around that has changed a bit, and now we're looking towards sanctuaries where maybe we can give them retirement without entertaining people, for example. But we've all had experience with that in our lives, both being exposed to dolphins and educated. But things move on. We hope science can transition with those ethics and observations, of course, with wild work. Cassie, you came from, the Midwest like I did, right? We're both inland girls. What's your experience?
Just kind of as Denise said, as long as the ethics continue in the right direction and possibly the open sea pens, I think there will always be some form of captivity, because when you have dolphins that strand or that cannot be returned back to the wild, but we, want to have them still live a fulfilled life. We can use them for teaching opportunities, but having them in an open sea pen is kind of the best way to go. So of course that takes money, and hopefully we can get there at some point. But yeah, I think there will always be a need for those animals who strand and can't be released, but don't, so the animals that cannot be released back into the wild.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point, because now that I have a small kid, I am always in two minds about taking him to aquariums or zoos, because on the one hand, yes, I don't like the animals to be in captivity, but both as a scientist and as a mom, I know that maybe this is one of his few chances to see these animals and develop some kind of connection to them, and maybe in the future want to protect them, right? And so it's sometimes difficult to to make a decision on it and be consequent with it. But I do agree that, as you said, maybe sanctuariums and open ocean water tanks or something like that would be the best to approach this. And now my question is related to studying dolphins in the wild. What are the challenges of doing this? Because I can imagine that doing it in a closed tank is way easier because you can follow the same dolphin, you can do lots of experiments with it, but in the wild, it has a lot of challenges, right? So tell us a bit about it.
Well, I'll rattle off my list of challenges. Number 1 is weather. Number 2 is financial. Number 3 is regular access for observation. And we're pretty lucky in the Bahamas. We work in probably one, if not the best places in the world to observe animals. The 4th for me is control. If you want to do an experiment, it's pretty hard to do in the wild. That's why we do that in more experimental kind of settings. And then I guess Cassie and I would probably agree it's just exhausting to be out in the field. I mean, it's a privilege, but it's exhausting with seas and hurricanes and sharks. I mean, there's all these, and people on the boat, there's all these, like any field study, I guess, there's a dynamic that can be challenging. We love the work. It's a privilege, but, and then, I guess the positive is you're away from your allergies, right, Cassie?
Yeah, apparently I never had this much of an issue till this season. So I don't know if it's something to do with something else going on in the environment, but yeah, they've been pretty bad. But I mean, going along with Denise's list, I can't really think of much to add except kind of going along with weather, but the current in the ocean. So the dolphins are very adapt to being able to swim up current or against current, and we are not. So we struggle sometimes to kind of keep up with them in the water, to be able to observe their behavior and get it on video. So yeah, for sure that current, I mean, they can be looking like they're not swimming at all, and they are just like flying past you, and there's nothing really you can do to keep up with them. It's just, you got to keep trying, and then eventually we kind of let them swim on their way. So yeah, definitely current would be one thing I would add.
I'd also add equipment challenges because, we have adapted our equipment as time goes on, right? You get better scientific instrumentation. But again, you try putting a computer underwater, right? Ooh, salt water, water, computer. I mean, anything you put underwater or in salt air is going to corrode and have problems and break. So that's a challenge. I mean, I guess the good part is we have new technologies all the time, right? Like drones and, underwater devices 24/7 that you can mount on the bottom now. So pros and cons of technology, but you like any study, I guess you have challenges with toys.
Cool. Nice that you mentioned the drones. And if I may have a follow-up question on that, have you observed that dolphins maybe get scared when they hear a drone approaching? Or because I guess with boats, you can kind of control that a little bit more because you can just switch off all engines and just stay there. But with drones and so on, have you observed anything like this, or they don't really care?
I mean, as far as we've noticed, they don't seem to care so much. I think we also can fly it at a pretty high altitude to where maybe the noise is a little bit dimmed for them. But when we put it up, we haven't noticed them like swimming faster to try and get away from it. And I think there have been a couple studies with not necessarily our species, but with a couple other species where it doesn't seem to affect their behavior or bother them in any way. So not that I've heard of. Denise, have you heard of any studies that have shown that they're bothering them?
Well, like you just said, Cassie, there are studies going on about that. People are testing types of drones, altitude, activity of a drone. So I think so far drones are pretty good if you stay at certain altitudes, depending on the species and what you're doing with them. So yeah, so that's probably an open question, but I'd say for the most part, no, because drones are being used a lot for whales and dolphins for health assessments, for tracking, of course. So I think as long as you behave, it'll be a good technology.
Very cool, and that's good news because the drones will definitely help with a lot of things to study. You said the crew on the boat is really important, and I was thinking, are you going out on day trips, or are you actually out at sea for several days at once?
So we go out for about 10 days at a time. So we're a live aboard a vessel, and historically we're often remote, so like way away from land. So the crew can be really important, and I tell you, besides the captain, the cook is the most important person on the boat, because food is really important for social time and for staying healthy. Cassie laughs, but it's true. And people getting along, you know, I mean, we've had various crew over the years, and you have switch outs, and, you know, we have some volunteers too and interns that come out, and, you know, personalities are really important in tight quarters when there's a lot of work to do. And, you know, everybody has mood swings occasionally. So, yeah, that's probably a psychological book to write in itself.
I definitely agree with that. I was just last week on a leadership course, and this is one of the things that most to-be leaders are worried about, is like how to identify personality disorders in people before you hire them. And the answer of the trainers was basically like, sorry, but there are no tools. Good luck. And yeah, when you're in a boat for a long time with a group of people, it can get really challenging. I remember some of my expeditions to the Arctic, 9 weeks on a research vessel. You can only go out briefly to the ice and come back. That can get challenging if you have some people that are not very well up here. Yeah.
Yeah, we've often thought we should use our boat for training for NASA astronauts. You know, like how well they survive.
Yeah.
Yes, that's for sure really important, even if you also do research on small islands, that I've been going to. The crew and having people work together is just the key, and it either makes it an extremely positive experience or an extremely negative one, or sometimes something in between. So you guys have been studying Atlantic spotted dolphin behaviors for a very, very long time. So what have you found out about them during your careers?
Well, I mean, there's a long list. We know a lot about their basic behavior and their reproduction, for example. So, you know, in our early years, we started just correlating sound with behavior. So we know what sounds match what behaviors. We know who hangs out with who, right? We track the generations. And, you know, as I got graduate students involved in the project, like Cassie, for example, did a really cool study asking the question of when spotted dolphins fight with each other versus when they fight with bottlenose dolphins, do they have different body language? And you can talk about the results a little if you want, Cass, but so you can kind of hone in on those really specific questions, because the two species do interact. One of the most interesting features of where we work actually is that interspecies interaction.
Yeah, so like Denise said, I was studying kind of differences in how the spotted dolphins fight their own species versus when they fight the bottlenose. And what we found is that when the spotteds fight the bottlenose, they actually use more energy-intensive behaviors. So there's a point that needs to be made, is that the bottlenose are about 3 feet or 1 meter larger than the spotteds. So they're a much bigger animal. So it makes sense that the spotteds need to use a lot more energy when they're fighting those bigger animals. But it can also be a little bit dangerous for them to do that, because the bottlenose could inflict some serious damage if they wanted to. So we also found Denise and somebody, I think it was Johnson.
Chris Johnson. They found that the spotted dolphins kind of have to have buddies to help them kind of win the aggression. So it's about 6 spotted dolphins to 1 bottlenose dolphin to kind of like overturn that aggression in the spotted's favor. And then on top of being able to study the aggression, I was able to figure out I was able to look at those behaviors more intently when I'm filming the aggression under the water in real time. And I notice those behaviors if they're directed at us in any way. So open mouth is one thing that's used during aggression a lot. And that's often misconstrued as looking as like the dolphin is smiling or the dolphin is happy, but they're actually kind of showing aggression towards us and kind of telling us to, hey, like back off or give us some room, or even like get out of the water. So being able to study that for my master's thesis has like made me able to finely tune and figure out what behaviors they're directing at us and if we need to get out of the water or not. So because we always want to respect their space. Yes, we want to get the data as much as we can,
but keeping that mutual respect between the two species, or between us and the spotteds, is very important as well.
Yeah, really, really important point as people interact with, wild and captive animals for that matter, is who are they and how can they tell you what they're feeling and what their, motivation is. And so we've learned that over the years, and we try to incorporate that into our research protocols for sure.
And just another follow-up question on that. So when you're talking about behaviors and motivations, as a biologist, we always tend to think that certain animals, for example, will appear or will go to where there's more food for them. But is this the main driver for dolphins? Or maybe you find more dolphins where they have more sargassum so they can play with it, and then food, it's like, well, we will find some food also in the sargassum. Or is it really, food is the main thing and the rest doesn't really matter?
I say it's probably food, sex, maybe sargassum.
Okay.
I mean, realistically, they have to eat, right? That's like the number one thing. And in fact, in 2013, half of our study group in one area moved quite a long way to the next sandbank down in the Bahamas, because there was what we finally realized with some data from oceanographic, from a data set from NOAA, that the food had crashed. And so after being there for almost 30 years, they had to move. I mean, that's pretty serious, right? If you're a resident animal because you have food around, all of a sudden your food dries up. So they had to move and adjust, their group, and they moved to a place with another group of dolphins who are already living. And so now they're having to get along with a new group of their own species, but it's still competition, right? So quite a natural experiment, but this is the challenge with climate change and all these things that are changing globally, right?
Sounds like human migration. Very similar, unfortunately.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, since you brought up sex a minute ago, and I love talking about sex, with these different pods and this movement you just discussed, when their reproductive activity, not sex, but literal reproductive activity, is that mostly carried out in the pod, or within their own cohorts, or do they look for mates outside of their main group of cohorts?
Well, really good question, and I'll throw some of it to Cassie, but part of it we don't know because they practice sex a lot, right, as juveniles, so they're very social sexual. When they become reproductively viable, we see more serious mating behavior, which includes like male coalitions, trying to herd a female around and then competing with another coalition. But the only way for us to find out who really sires offspring is to do genetic work, right? And we do that by collecting fecal material from known individuals and then analyzing it relative to the calves. But most places in the world that have studied dolphins and do genetic sampling from skin or biopsy sampling, I mean, it certainly looks like there are animals that come in from outside areas to mate because you got to spread the genes around, right? But, or in some cases you might have animal or males moving into a group that aren't related and they somehow get incorporated into the group and now they're mixed up already. So it's still big questions. Cassie, we've seen a lot of mating in general, but it's about tracking it long term and trying to figure it out with the data, right?
Yeah. So as Denise was saying, so the older guys, so we call them the fused age class. So with the Atlantic spotted dolphin, they have 4 color phases, kind of relating to their age. So when the spotted dolphins are first born, they're born without spots. So they actually look like little bottlenose dolphins. And we call those the two-tones. And then when they first start to get some spots, we call those the speckled. That's about 3 to 4 years old. And then they start to get white spots up on the dorsal sides, on the top side. That's called a mottled. And that's probably about 8 to 15 years old. And then the fused, which are the adults, is about 15 plus. So what one of Dr. Herzing's PhD students found, her name is Dr. Michelle Green. So she was the one who did the fecal analyzing genetics to figure out who the father is. And she found that it's the fused animals. So those older adults are the ones who are actually siring the offspring. So one thing that we're curious of now, since we had that move down to Bimini, we're trying to figure out with the new genetics if there's intermingling between the Little Bahama Bank animals, which were the original study site, and a mixing in with the Great Bahama Bank, which are the Bimini guys. So to see if there's any genetic mixing between those is that new information that we're trying to get here soon. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see who's siring the offspring, and maybe there's some intermingling between the two groups.
Yeah, that's kind of what prompted my question when you said, well, they had to leave this and they're, mingling in with these two different groups. That's, that seemed like a fascinating study to me. Thank you for sharing that and all. And now I'm coming up on the last question we have and all. And I hope this is the most fun question that you've been asked today. We don't usually get to ask this question to people, but I'd like each of you to share with us the most neatest, memorable, coolest. What's your best day at work? I guess working with these magnificent, intelligent species.
Well, there are a lot, of course, for those of us that have been out for decades. I think for me, part of the neatest insight of everything is that the dolphins are individuals and have specific personalities, right? And I remember quite a while ago when I was in the water with one specific dolphin named Paint. And dolphins often greet you by swimming around you fast and whistling, and that seems to be a typical greeting. But Paint would always saddle up to me in the water, and she'd dive down vertically and look up at me. And so I started mimicking her. I started diving down and looking up at her, and that became our little greeting over the years, right? So, okay, whatever. So she recognizes me as an individual, and I recognize her as an individual. So one day Paint came by, and she had her first calf, who was named Brush. And so I was swimming behind them, and Paint did her little greeting, went down, and then I went down and looked up at her, and we came back to the surface, and then all of a sudden her calf went down and hung there. And I was like, oh my God, she's teaching her calf how to greet me. And so of course I went down and hung, and so it's that kind of thing where you go, wow, there's learning, there's teaching, there's individual recognition. So that hit me pretty hard. It's like, okay, there's a lot going on here with their minds, and much more than we can probably access with data to a certain extent. That's one of many stories, but that was one that I tell a fair amount of time just because it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, for me, there's so many to count. I think two kind of instances. One is just being able to be in the water when aggression is going on. There's just so much data going on. It's all chaos, and it can be very intimidating to be in the water when the dolphins, because it's usually like big male groups that have the really powerful aggression. The females, they can be aggressive towards one another, but it's not as dramatic. So it's always cool to be able to watch all those behaviors that I was studying for my thesis and being able to know that's that behavior and what it's doing. So that's really cool to be able to watch that underwater and be involved in that. And then another instance is, because we're talking about sargassum and how the dolphins play with it, one really cool experience was probably 2 summers ago. We had Moose and his mom. So Moose is a speckled now. He's a speckled male. And then his mom, Mira. And they were playing with sargassum, and they were super engaging with the humans. So they would drop the sargassum in front of us, and we could pick it up and dive down. And then they'd be so excited, and they'd twirl down with you and come in and grab it. And it's just really cool that a wild animal would take the time to just engage with the human. I mean, they could be doing whatever dolphins do, but to be able to have time to hang out with a human for a little bit and kind of teach them how to play their game, it's just a really awesome thing to be able to experience. And so, yeah, that's probably one of my favorites, is when they get very engaging with the sargassum and kind of incorporating you in their world a little bit.
I don't have any words at all. And, I've done some behavioral study, believe it or not, with lobsters, Panulirus argus, and those guys can learn too. And they can teach each other, not just learn, Pavlovian stuff. And, but yeah, they can teach each other. And, anytime you have that kind of interaction, it's something that goes straight to your heart. And so thanks for sharing those stories with us.
You're welcome.
Welcome. Yeah, those are the fun stories to tell.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, and I really hope that you and many other people get the chance to continue enjoying these beautiful animals in the wild for many, many years, and that we really manage to protect the environments where they live so that they can continue playing and continue eating where they're used to eating and not having to move around and be displaced. So thank you very much for the work you do and for sharing it with us today. I am sure our listeners will enjoy this interview a lot.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Okay, well, Francisca, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you guys summed it up perfectly. It was a really, really enjoyable interview, and I'm looking forward to maybe seeing dolphins once with sargassum as well. That would be cool.
Want to thank you guys for being with us today, all the way from Florida, and all. And this is, you know, I always say this, that this is one of my favorite interviews, and really just about every one of them really is, and all, they just keep getting better. And but this is one that was a little bit different because we don't usually talk about mammals here, and so thank you guys a whole lot, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you guys having us. It was fun.
Thanks a lot.
What did you guys take away from this conversation? Robbie, what was your favorite part, or what did you learn today?
All of it was my favorite part, and all. Well, I kind of enjoyed, the normal stuff and all that we usually do, but the follow-up question about the reproductive behaviors was, I think that was the most fascinating part to me, and of course that the dolphins are initiating play with the researchers. So I thought that was pretty cool as well. How about you, Mar?
Well, actually, for me, like the part where I felt most identified with them was when they were talking about the research expeditions and how if people are strange, then the work can be a little bit strange as well, or stressful, and that if the people are really nice, then it can be really nice. So that was the part where I was like, yeah, I feel you. I know what you mean. And then about the dolphins and the sargassum interactions, I mean, I actually never thought about it before, but of course it makes sense that they will use it as a thing to play. But still, I am pretty sure there are still questions that we haven't answered about this interaction. And I'm pretty sure the sargassum has other purposes in the life of a dolphin that is not just play. But I think no one has really looked at it before. So I was thinking like, this would be an amazing like PhD thesis or something to just work on. Okay, what do they really get out of this interaction besides something to play, right? Yeah, it was just in my head. I was already like planning 5 PhD projects about this. So I really like that.
Yes, and I like the fact that they also showed that it isn't just like play isn't just play, like that play is extremely important for their social interactions and for becoming a good dolphin when they're older and knowing how to interact with each other, which I think is very similar in humans. And they said okay, the sargassum is used for play, but that doesn't mean it's not essential for the dolphins, because play is so important to dolphins. They may really need the sargassum and don't have much of an alternative for that. So I thought that was really interesting. And the other thing I thought that was also interesting is, even though they are studying dolphins in the wild, they aren't against people studying dolphins in captivity. So they actually said that studying dolphins in captivity is really important. And I almost thought maybe they would say, no, we have to study dolphins only in the wild. But they said there's some stuff you can study better in the wild and some stuff that's better in captivity. So I thought that was really interesting too.
Yeah, on that line, I was thinking we should actually take some sargassum and bring it to an aquarium, and then, you can do really experiments on this, in an aquarium, because you can put it out and see how they react to it and what they do with it. And if maybe you put Sargassum in a tank for several months, maybe their health improves or not. I don't know, like you can really look at a control group, which is what they said you cannot really do in the wild. But yeah.
Well, just so you'll know, just north of La Playa del Carmen is La Aventura. It's a coastal city, and they have a dolphin experience / manatee thing there going on. So they got a lot of, they got a number of marine mammals there, large megafauna. And I had some friends of mine from Mote Marine Lab down there. When I was there before, I didn't get to go see them, but they were down there testing some drones and some sonar sound equipment, listening equipment. And they may be interested in doing something with you when y'all are down there next summer. Well, I could introduce you to Beth Brady of the Mote Marine Lab, and maybe she could set something up for you.
Is that the project on Isla Mujeres, Robbie? Or is that a different one?
No, that's just no. That's right there. That's just north of you on the coast in La Aventura.
That is south of us. That's between us and Tulum.
Okay, then south of you then.
Yeah, and there's also a dolphin project in Isla Mujeres as well.
Yeah, I don't know anyone working.
When I was there in 2007, I think it was, there was also in Xcaret, in the park Xcaret, they also had dolphins, and you could also pay a lot of money to swim with them and whatever. And it was kind of half in the wild. I mean, they were in the ocean, they just had them in a kind of in a bay. Yeah.
Lots of opportunities.
Yes, there are. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being with us today. You could have been anywhere else on the planet, but you chose to be with us here in Jupiter, Florida, with our marine mammal folks. You could have, or in Westphalia, Germany, with Mar, or down in Playa del Carmen with Francisca, or right here in the Low Countries of the Carolinas with me. But we appreciate y'all for being here today. I want you to know this podcast is brought to you with some financial support from Seafields. We really appreciate the work they're doing, dealing with sargassum inundation events, and look forward to working with them in the future. And we'll see you next week.
See you all next week. Have fun thinking about dolphins playing with sargassum.
Yeah, see you all next week.
Thank you for tuning in today and learning with us from our guests. If you want more information about what our guests talked about today, then please check our show notes for links and information in our archives. And don't forget to like and share our podcast with your friends. If you enjoyed our podcast, please consider supporting us financially by becoming a patron. For as little as $1 per month, you can support us and get exclusive benefit of submitting questions for our interviewees before the interview.
The Sargassum Podcast is produced by Marine Conservation Without Borders and is made possible with financial support from Seafields and the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center, U.S. Department of Education, Title V grant. It is produced by Marcel Van de Kamp, Lauren Blankenship, Cleo Maridakas, Franziska Elmer, and Eloise Lopez, and hosted by Robbie Thigpen, Franziska Elmer, Mar Fernandez, Florence Menez, Cleo Maridakas, and Paula Diaz. We will be back next week with another exciting guest. The music of this podcast is from the song Dema Pray by Drizzle the Roadrunner, an artist from Roatan. Follow him on Spotify or YouTube for more music. But for now, here is the full song, Dema Pray.
Hey, brother, hear me now. Brother, dog. Know me, understand. Now for them no want to see we get nothing. That's why them a pray and always front and star. Now for them no want to see we get nothing. That's why them a pray. Now for them a pray. Them a pray. Them a pray. Me no gain progress. Now for them a pray. Them a pray. Me no reap success. Now for them a pray. them a pre, me no gain progress. Enough of them a pre. Them a pre, me no reap success. So me tell them, yeah, promises come and me no take that. Only if it come from Jah, I'll accept that. Enough of them me put me trust in and give me setback. Yo, select that, we'll and pull up that. Tell some wicked that bad mind, me no fear them. Anytime them cheat and chat, me no hear them. Me dash a few hard soak for the queer them. Me dash a few hard soak, tell them where them. Now for them a pray. Them a pray, me no gain progress. Now for them a pray. Them a pray, me no reap success. So me tell them, yeah. Yes, me know me have a lot of fake friends, but me never woulda thought me woulda have fake family. So me tell them straight, me no trust them. Me no trust you and me no trust him. Fake friend lost bad mind in a real life. Star me no rate that, star me no rate that. When me real for me woulda bust a million shot in a real life. Now for them a pray. Them a pray, me no gain progress. Now for them a pray. Them a pray, me no reap success. Now for them a pray. Them a pray, me no gain progress. Now for them a pray. Them a pray, me no reap success. So me tell them, yeah. Oh, them a pray, me no reap success. Screaming out loud. Me woulda tell them fi go look alike, but them a hate and grudge and creep on mine. Them a move like Judas. Them a move like Judas. Plus, everybody have a life to live. So when I give one rascal who I try judge me, let them chit and chat. So what them want to say, cause none of them out there nah feed me. Now for them a pray. Them a pray, me no gain progress. Now for them a pray. Them a pray, me no reap success. Now for them a pray.